Social media takes our natural sin tendencies and amplifies it. So, what is already in our heart is easier to recognize when we're on social media. And I think the reason that a lot of believers want to flee it entirely is A, we don't like to see and have manifested how much sin is in our own hearts. And also, we don't we also don't like to see the sin of the world.
The Good Book Company is the publisher of Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary People and Say the Right Thing by Carolyn Lacey. In Extraordinary Hospitality, Carolyn shares 7 ways to welcome like Jesus without experiencing burnout. In Say the Right Thing, she moves beyond teaching Christians what we shouldn't say and instead encourages readers to use their words in a way that glorifies God and actively encourages others. You can use code ALLTHINGS at thegoodbook.com to receive 25% off both of these books. Hey, All Things listeners, whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe, and maybe even leave a comment or review. Thanks so much. Welcome, everybody. I am joined today by my friend, Elizabeth Santelman. We are actually just virtual friends, haven't yet been able to meet in person, but Elizabeth has been such an encouragement to me online. We've gotten to know each other over Instagram. So without further ado, I want to say welcome. And Elizabeth, tell everybody who you are if they don't know you yet.
Hey, yes, and I'm so bummed we missed that in-person meeting. Like, we looked for each other the whole conference, and it just didn't happen.
We tried.
Yes, the best efforts. So I am a mom of 3 little boys, and I run the account Sunshine in My Nest, and I homeschool our children. We participate with our church and love having friends into our home, and yeah.
So the way that I know you is through Instagram.
Okay.
Tell everybody when you got on Instagram, how you started using it. This is something that's heavy on my mind because as an author, podcaster, I'm always sharing things on Instagram, always having to check myself, check my motives, check my mental health when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
And I have teen daughters. So I'm doing it for myself and I'm doing it with them. But I know you on Instagram because you have a big following and you have a big influence on Instagram amongst especially Christian women, Christian moms, the spheres that we're in. So
Yeah.
how did that happen?
So until 2017, I had a private account, and I was part of like a church and a local community that really rejected all things online. But my family was long distance, and so I had a hands-off as much as possible approach to social media and to like websites, technology, all of that. But there was a couple of accounts that I started following and a couple of friends that I had begun having conversations with. And there was one day at coffee, I was talking with a young mom, and she told me, she's like, I have the minimalist life. I have everything is beautiful. Now all I have to do is become LDS and I will be ready for an Instagram life. And God used those words in my heart. Like, it was an immediate transformation. And I was like, as the church, we have to stop rejecting these new forms of really missions. And if we're not active and participating, where the moms in our churches are going to be going for information is to the people who are there. And so I made my account public and started like doing the things that I saw people doing to grow Instagram accounts, but putting it as a focus on discipling children and raising gospel families. And that was my heart and why I started engaging. So.
Okay, you bring up a fascinating point. What was that LDS comment all about? What's the LDS world on Instagram?
Yeah. Sorry. No, I should have added some context.
Well, a lot of people know, but maybe some don't.
Yeah, so there is like most of the influencer homemaking moms who have gotten really big on Instagram all belong to the LDS church
Hmm.
or various forms of fundamentalist Christian groups.
Yeah.
And like they're huge and
Hmm.
like they do cooking and baking and like we've had so many children and like they share their resources. And because of that, their churches are growing. And they're really appealing to young people our age who are lonely and who are in their homes and who don't know how to build local communities. And so they're going to community online.
Yeah.
And I feel like the thing is so much of the theology of those churches is based in like performancism and like
Mm.
how we make ourselves look as good as possible, and so the
Yeah.
yoke is just so heavy.
Yeah.
So my heart for moms is that we don't come to this trying to be as beautiful as possible.
Mm.
Pour out to our families because that's what Jesus has poured out for us. And
Mm.
returning it to the beautiful truth that we have in our own faith and making that grace available for moms to pass on to their kids.
Yeah. That is beautiful and not at all the way most of us talk about social media. um, but I love your point about the LDS church because having been a missionary myself, something that I often think about is that Mormons are typically willing to do something that believers, followers of Christ are not. There
Yeah.
was an apologist that I followed early in my early years as a Christian, a young adult Christian, who said that the LDS church is willing to do for a lie what Christians are not willing to do for the truth. And we
Yeah.
see that, right? Mormon missionaries are in every town, every
Yep.
neighborhood. They've been in every country I have ever traveled to.
Yeah.
So there's this impulse, this conviction, this willingness
Hmm.
in the Mormon church and the LDS church to
Yeah.
go, whether
Yeah.
that's door to door or on social media.
Yeah.
And so I love that, in that conversation with your friend, it sort of clicked for you. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
people are stewarding social media to go. This
Yeah.
is a way to respond to the Great Commission. This is a way to extend care and discipleship and encouragement to people who are at home.
Yeah. Well, because even if we're not appealing to our unbelieving neighbors on social media, we're helping other moms
Hmm.
disciple the next generation of
Yeah.
believers.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people want to help their kids and want to take their faith walk to the next level. They just really don't know how to do it. Like, and if you
Totally.
haven't had somebody
Hmm.
cast a vision for what's possible in your own home, we either make it way too complicated and not sustainable, or we just don't do it at all because it feels too overwhelming. And so like
Hmm.
what does it look like to live out daily discipling your children?
Yeah. I think that is so helpful. When I was a young mom overseas and I had all these toddlers and no family
Hmm.
nearby, and I was not raised in a Christ-centered home. I
Hmm.
wasn't raised, my parents are precious to me, don't get me wrong, but it
Oh
was,
yeah, yeah.
I wanted to do something different as in the way that the culture of my home. And I didn't know where to turn. And I remember before social media, there were a few ladies in my real life in Japan that I could turn to. But there was this one blog, and I don't even remember who it is anymore, but I would go and refresh that blog like 3 or 4 times a day
Yeah.
because there was no social media, but this woman was just documenting really minor, sort of superficial ways that she was caring for her kids, but
Hmm.
with the love of Christ, and it was so helpful to me.
Hmm.
So I speak from experience, knowing how helpful it is to connect with somebody who's ahead of you and
Yes.
offering you ideas, wisdom, encouragement, cheering for you, practical things that you can do as a young woman in the faith or a young mom. And you're doing that. So I think it is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like in the church, we kind of have two different perspectives on social media, and you
Hmm.
voiced both of them. The one
Yes.
where it's like, reject it, it's evil, it's bad, stay offline, right?
Yeah.
Or the like, no, it's wonderful, grow your platform. In fact, you can even support your family. And
Yeah.
sometimes that one goes awry in terms of, as you've said, being really putting out really beautiful things, performing, trying to,
Hmm.
appeal to man and please man.
Hmm.
Um, and there's just so many pitfalls, Elizabeth, so many
Yeah.
pitfalls. How do you stay out of both ditches? What do you do to sort of stay on mission with your Instagram account?
Yeah, so I think that social media takes our natural sin tendencies and amplifies it. So, what is already in our heart is easier to recognize when we're on social media. And I think the reason that a lot of believers want to flee it entirely is A, we don't like to see and have manifested how much sin is in our own hearts. And
Ooh,
also,
girl.
we don't, we also don't like to see the sin of the world. Like when you
Mm,
get on and you're engaging, you're participating in social media as a platform, like idolatry is very, very present and obvious. Like we put people on pedestals, we worship consumerism. I had to take a break after December because there was so much consumerism. Like my
mm,
soul just felt
mm,
really, really heavy, and I needed some time to take away and just like take the trash out. Like, because
mm-hmm,
it's everywhere, it soaks in. And instead of fleeing that, we're called to live in the world and not be of the world
mm,
and recognize those things in our own hearts. But for me, the biggest way is starting to look to see how is the gospel transforming this space. And as I'm entering, instead of putting myself and my family on a pedestal because we have our own sins, like we're constantly walking toward being sanctified, coming to it as a platform and recognizing that every single little bubble that pops up in my DMs and every little bubble that's a comment on one of my posts represents a person, and coming on to it as a platform, not to be seen and to be an
mm,
example of what people should do, but to see people. And I think to myself before I open the app as much as
mm-hmm,
possible, how am I going to come on and say, there you are
mm,
today, instead of
mm-hmm,
opening it up and being like, okay, here I am, I've arrived, like,
mm,
let the applause begin, which is where I think a lot of
mm-hmm,
times as believers, we step into this space upside down because we're mimicking the way that the world is already
mm-hmm,
using it.
mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to copy a pattern instead of transform the pattern with the gospel. And so, really learning to use it as a tool to see other people out.
I think it
So,
is tremendously helpful to alter the way we think about it
mhm.
from how can I be seen to
Mhm.
how can I see others.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
that's just a huge mind shift.
as we're making resources, like it's not how can I sell more books, it's like how can I serve people with
Mm-hmm,
the message that God's already placed in my heart and called me to do. Or
mm-hmm,
instead of like how can I get more followers, it's like how can I put gospel discipleship in front of more people?
mm-hmm,
Or instead of how can I expand my assets in this
mm-hmm,
world by
mm-hmm.
choosing to do this. It's like, how can I serve better if am financially able to give? And so
Yeah,
taking everything and reversing it to have a kingdom outlook
yeah.
is it's just the way that the gospel transforms things, and it really
Mm,
removes that ickiness of social media because we're
mm-hmm.
not participating it in a way that drags our souls down, but instead it breathes Christ's life into a dark space.
Right, right. I have heard you before, Elizabeth, use the phrase digital hospitality.
Yes.
And you've kind of, we came in it from the back door. You've kind of already described that, but unpack that just a little bit more for us. What is digital hospitality?
Sure. So I kind of struggle with people watching my life. Like
Mm,
it's been something that it's weird to like get your head wrapped around.
mm-hmm.
But growing up, we had these huge bay windows in our farmhouse, and we had Amish neighbors all around us on every side that would drive by very, very slowly in their buggies and observe everything that was happening in our life through our huge bay windows. And contrary to like all the Christian romance novels, the Amish are not believers. Like, if people have Bible studies or read a Bible in their own language, they're kicked out of the church community in a lot of places. And that's the way that the community that lived around us was. I'm not saying every Amish person is that way, but in the community around us, that's the way that it was. And so my parents started seeing, like, they would purposely leave the windows and the curtains open because they wanted to show what it looked like to be a gospel centered family. And
Wow.
so I kind of see our stories being similar to that, is I'm opening the curtains to our life and
Mm-hmm.
allowing people to see what does it look like to have a gospel family? What does it look like to live your life in a way that's maybe just a little bit different than people are accustomed to?
Yeah, I love that. Digital hospitality. It's a great phrase to keep in mind when we log on. Now, a minute ago, you said that we feel ickiness when we get on social media, that there is still darkness. You have given us a really good perspective and foundation for how we would pursue social media. And yet you've acknowledged what's true, that there is still some darkness and ickiness there. How do we navigate that? What do you do when you start to feel that?
I think that's where we have to stop looking at social media being the problem and instead focus on our hearts being the problem. So, allowing our hearts to be transformed by the gospel and allowing it to be formed most by the word of God. And so, as we expose ourselves to the word of God, it changes our hearts, not just in our homes and in our lives, but in the way we engage with social media also. And I think, as in anything, you have to be careful about what you're putting in front of your eyes. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not recommending going and following some of the darkest accounts on the web. um, but there are a lot of accounts of other people who are seeking to do the same thing.
Mm,
So choosing who you're following is really important, and choosing who you're connecting with and engaging with. One of the best things that I did is 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, almost 3 years ago now, I found this other young mom who was doing the same thing and had the same heart on Instagram. And being able to talk about people who verbally assault us has been really
mm,
helpful. Being
mm,
able to watch the way that she opens her heart and life with people has been helpful. So finding other examples of people who are doing the same thing.
mhm.
And but then again, just like being in the word of God, because social media isn't unique. Like, we run into the same problems when we watch television or
Yeah.
the podcasts that we listen to or the books that we consume. Like, we can get into just as many trash novels as we can
Mm,
trash Instagram accounts. And
mhm.
what you're forming your heart with really does matter.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, we are all being discipled by something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we are being discipled by Instagram, but we can also
Mhm.
be discipled by the word of God.
Yep.
And so how do we prioritize our time and our consumption so
Mhm.
that we're
Mhm.
making sure that we are formed by that which is
Yes.
eternal and truly good over that which is temporal?
And another thing I've had to constantly guard my heart against is not allowing social media to become my socialization. Like,
Mm,
that we're still inviting our real life community and like
mhm,
hearing the hearts of real people, because it can be really easy to allow people constantly telling you how amazing whatever you're doing is, to like begin to feed your soul. And like, you
mm,
need real life friendships of people who
mhm.
like see you on your good days and your bad days, your good hair days and your kids falling apart. Because I'm never going to take a video of my child throwing a tantrum.
Right.
And so when we're living in real life community, like, it is humbling and shows us our place in the world. And
Mhm.
it's invaluable. So
That's so good. Elizabeth, what would you say to my teen daughters? We're having these conversations all the time. One still does not have social media yet. The youngest one
mhm.
hasn't graduated to that level yet of life. But what would you say to her, or to one has had it now for about 6 months? I mean, what are the things that we should be saying to the girls coming after us as they start this journey?
Yeah, yeah. So, one of the things that I've heard people talk about books is, if your heart has like a check when you're
Hmm.
reading it,
Hmm.
like, bring it to mom and let's have a
Mm,
conversation about it. And I think we can do that if we keep the lines open in communication with our kids. Like, if something feels off, let's just have a conversation about it. Because I do think
mm,
sometimes, especially for our kids who have more tender consciences, sometimes things that aren't necessarily a problem cause issue, and like, it
yeah.
can give us a reason to talk through those things. But for things that are more serious, like being able to talk through, like, okay, um why do you think with what you believe? Like, where is
Mm,
this falling out of alignment that it's giving
mm,
your spirit check?
mhm,
So
mhm.
instead of teaching them to avoid it altogether, teaching them how to use it, the same as we do with television programming and
Yeah.
books that we're reading.
Yeah, that's really good. A phrase that we use in our house frequently is this good for your soul?
Yeah,
Whether it's
yeah,
a book or a movie or social media, is this okay for your soul? How's this shaping your soul?
yeah.
But
And
it's
knowing,
hard. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, knowing when you need a break is important too. Like,
Yeah.
because there are like clicking habits, like
Mm.
you're
Oh,
bored
there
for
are.
2.5 seconds. And so you open something. And so making it harder for yourself, or there's all kinds of technology now that allows you to like set limits to tell you when you've been on 15 minutes or when you've been on an
Hmm.
hour. And like, sometimes just being more aware is helpful.
Yeah, that's really good. I think setting those limits is super good. I mean, we do that for our kids, and sometimes I do that for myself as well. Locking myself out of accounts if I've been on too long, or deleting them off my phone altogether if I need to take that break.
Yeah, yeah.
You
But
mentioned, no, go
oh, but
ahead.
then also giving yourself freedom sometimes to be like, yeah, it's okay. So, like, we give
Mm,
ourselves freedom to sit down for 20 minutes to an hour and watch
hmm.
something on TV. And
Hmm.
so, if this is what genuinely helps you to relax and like brings you joy, like, then don't feel guilt about that. Like,
Mm,
enjoy it for what, like, because you made an intentional decision
yeah,
to participate. So then intentionally allow yourself, but truly be present while you're
yeah,
partaking. Kind of like some of the same advice we get around food. Like sit
yeah.
down
It
and
is.
actually enjoy it. Don't feel bad about it when you're done, and
Yeah,
like allow the satisfaction of the moment to hit just right, I guess.
yeah. No, I was thinking exactly that as you said that. It's like food. It's like having a feast or a
Yeah.
celebration, and but I think there's a fine line there of consuming that which really does bring peace
Mhm.
versus
Mhm.
scrolling mindlessly, right?
Mhm.
And it
Yeah,
can be easy to go from one to the other without
it
even
can.
noticing. And
It
rather
can.
than 20 minutes later feeling refreshed and encouraged because you looked at the accounts that point you to the Lord, you instead feel empty and gross. Like you said, the
Yeah. Yeah.
ickiness.
Well, and
Was
I
that
think that
hard for you to take that break when you did in December? You said after December you took a break. Was that like a struggle to go offline?
surprisingly, I loved it. Like,
Mm,
and I think that's a sign. Even though I am present and participating a lot, I don't think it's an addiction because like there's a lot of other things that are bringing so much joy. I didn't even miss it. So if I didn't have
mhm,
a podcast and have to like start to, and again, if it wasn't for why I felt called to participate in the first place, like it could
mhm.
be really easy just to like sign off and do all kinds of other things for forever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How does your family feel about your Instagram account? Like your husband and your boys are young yet, but are they on board? Or even your friends in real life? Do
Yeah.
people are they excited about it? Do they tease you about it? Are they like, oh no, she's got her phone out again? Or what does that look like?
So I don't really bring it out in front of friends and family because, again, like the part of community that I am in, they don't want to have their faces or their pictures
Hmm.
online, which does make it hard to show how we live in
Yeah,
community
yeah,
because I'm trying to respect the boundaries of our
that's
friends.
good. Hmm.
There was a few people who I took a lot of heat from
Mm,
initially when I decided this, like I just kept feeling overwhelming call. And there are those things that are pressed onto your heart that no matter what anybody else says, you're compelled to do it. And
yep.
that's what this was for me.
Mm,
But the comments that were made off and on were painful enough that I almost quit a lot of
mm,
times. And my husband was the one that was in my corner saying like, no, this is something that you're doing good work at. This is
hmm,
something, and it does bring me an element of joy.
mm,
It is like he's been the one that has told me to keep going, and it takes time, and he is willing to sacrifice the time to make it happen because yeah, he's at my back and he sees it as a mission. So,
yeah.
and I've never had trouble with the kids on that. Like like they see it as like they see their place in it and
Mm-hmm.
participating. And we do make tiny bits of money, or we're able to do little field trips in our city. And so
Mm-hmm.
mommy's work did this for us. And
Mm.
so like I never
I
want it
love
to
it.
be something that they look back on and they're angry about. And I try really hard to like respect them and their stories. So when they look back, they'll know how much I love them. That it's not
Mm.
me getting on to complain about them or to talk about
Yeah.
how hard it is, or the sin issues that they're struggling with, or ways that I'm struggling with being their parent. Like I want it to be a time capsule of my love for them in this
Mm.
process also.
Yeah, that's sweet. You have just really pointed to caring well for your real life community as
Mm-hmm.
you pursue serving your online community. Being respectful of your
Yeah.
friends in your church and your community who doesn't want to be online, and being okay
Mm-hmm.
with that and being like, okay, we won't film those things. I will not show those things.
Mm-hmm.
And also being really intentional about the content that you share about your kids, wanting
Yeah.
it to convey your love and respect for them and how you cherish them. And I think that's those are some things those are pitfalls that are real.
Yeah.
It's the parenting posts that go viral are the ones where people do videotape their kids having a
Yes.
tantrum.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
parents do kind of mock their kids, but it sounds like you've made a really intentional decision um, to do
And
this
not
well.
just that, but guarding also the heart of church too.
Mm,
Because you
mm,
were talking about the things that will make you go viral are the
mm,
things often that stir up controversy, or things that otherize different parts of your community, or even certain aspects of the world. But I don't feel like long term and sustainably that calls people in, that when we're calling other people out or we're attempting to gain traction by outrage, it ends up pushing people away rather than
hmm.
bringing them in to our point of view. So that's another thing I've very actively
Yeah,
made a point not to participate in that
yeah.
side of social media culture, because it doesn't serve anybody. It
Mm.
The people who agree with you, it causes them to have hatred toward people who disagree with you, and the people who disagree with you are just alienated by your message then.
Yeah. Did you pick your handle, Sunshine in My Nest, way back when? Or is that something that, as your principles and foundation for how you do social media, kind of changed and grew? Did you change it? Because what you're describing is offering sunshine
Yeah,
to the
no,
world through Instagram.
that's been it from the beginning. Like when I
Hmm.
made it public, it went to Sunshine in My Nest, and it's been that ever since. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, what you're describing is very much sunshine. You
mhm.
are trying to shine light in what can
Yeah,
be a
and
dark place.
if people are thinking about doing this, like I recommend writing down your goals at the
Hmm.
beginning. Like I
Hmm.
wrote down a list of people who I hoped to become as an older woman. They were women who
Mm.
had years in the faith already and had been participating in ministry for a long time. Then I wrote down what my tone is going to be when I
Hmm.
approach,
Good.
because on
Yeah.
bad days it can be really easy, like we were just talking about, to like want to vent, and that isn't the place for venting. Your best
Hmm.
friend is the place for venting. Your
Hmm.
husband is the place for venting. An older mentor is a place for venting. Your social media is not the place. And so, um, I wrote down my tone is always going to be grateful and it's always
Mm,
going to be kind. And
mm,
because I wanted to cultivate more gratitude and kindness in my own heart. And so by choosing to focus on having that be what I post, I feel like it's also grown inside of me too, because every day I have to get on and be like, okay, how am I going to be grateful today? And how am I going to be kind? And how am I going to see other people
yeah,
instead of coming on to be seen?
yeah. These are some really radical, different ways of viewing social media than we typically view it. And I'm
Mhm.
just personally really encouraged and just reminded of, I love what you've shared with us. How can I go on to see others rather than to be seen? How can I
Yeah.
be a light? How can I foster gratitude and kindness and humility in this space? And you're doing that. And I'm really, really grateful. I love to see social media redeemed and used for the kingdom,
Yeah.
used for missions, used to proclaim the name of Christ. I think all of this has been just really encouraging and really countercultural.
Mhm.
So thank you for your presence online, Elizabeth. And where can people follow what you do? Where can they go get a glimpse of this sunshine in your nest?
People can find me at Sunshine in My Nest on Instagram and also my blog. Pinterest, I collect different ideas for how to welcome people in and how to make our homes more beautiful.
Awesome. I love that, Elizabeth. And say hello to your sons who I hear in the background. Thank them for your time. We are grateful for your contribution here. And yeah, have a great day. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Jen.
Thanks so much for taking time to listen to All Things with me, Jen Oshman, where we look at current events and cultural trends through a Christian lens. All things were created through Jesus and for Jesus, so we're seeking to apply His word to what's happening here and now.